I'm Lori Takichi. I'm a program officer here in the Division of Research on Learning at NSF. And so this afternoon's session will feature talks from 4 projects that have offered to share their experiences dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. And specifically, they're going to address the question, as Rabia says, what have informal science learning settings learned about designing and measuring for impact as a result of moving in-person experiences online? So this topic is obviously relevant to all of us here who are attending yet another conference taking place entirely online. And I myself really miss being able to mingle between sessions and eating Danishes at the break table because I only eat Danishes at conferences. And I'm also less likely to strike up conversations with strangers in these virtual spaces. And yet, I feel like I've attended some really interesting conferences hosted by institutions that are based in Boston and even Germany over this past year. And I don't know about you, but I thought the spatial chat platform that Case set up for the poster sessions actually worked. I felt like I was in the room with other people and I could actually read the font on the posters, which is something I have a hard time doing when I'm in an actual poster session because everything's so little. So if anything, these crazy times are spurring innovation and new practices that are going to stay with us long after we're allowed to gather in large groups again. So all of this to say, through this very trivial example that I've just shared, that there have been both losses and gains due to this pandemic. And this is my way of segueing to the official framing for this session, which is that the COVID-19 has resulted in sudden large-scale shift to online engagement in education and communication. And the field continues to adjust and learn as this massive experiment just keeps chugging along. So not only did many ASL projects originally conceived to provide in-person experiences move online, but so too did the research and evaluation plans, which were forced to adapt in appropriate and integral ways. And the shift to online disrupted many ASL PI's project plans, their research designs, changed what and how incomes and impacts are measured, and in some cases may have even called to question the very nature of the target learning experience. Still, other ASL projects were forced to adjust their approaches to the new reality of online learning, or shift their conceptions about what it means to be successful, or rethink how their audiences and communities would benefit from a now purely virtual experience. So 4 teams have volunteered to share the opportunities and challenges they have faced in shifting their R&D activities online. And so I'm going to very briefly introduce them in the order in which they'll be speaking, but then allow them to provide more context about their roles in institutions during their talks. So Kathleen, is your team ready? I think so, yes. Okay.
Yes, we're both
great. So we're going to start with Kathleen Gray from UNC at Chapel Hill's Institute for the Environment and Lynn Cross from North Carolina's Museum of Natural Sciences, followed by the team of Aaron Jant from Western Kentucky University and Carrie Jubrin from Tompkins Community Action, Inc. And then third in line will be Charles Shea from the Institute for Future Intelligence and Kim Spangenberg from VHS Learning, who's actually not going to be here, but she will be here in spirit with Charles. And then lastly, we'll have Karen Lozano from the University of Texas at Rio Grande Valley and Aaron Masari from the University of Minnesota talk. So with that, I will let Kathleen take it away. Kathleen and Lynn, sorry, thank you.
Thank you, Lori. It's exciting to be here with everybody. Lynn is actually going to kick us off, but I'll be driving. So Lynn, just tell me when you're ready for me to advance.
Sure. So our project was Youth Engaging in the Science of Resilience. And it was a partnership between the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences, where I'm at, and the Institute for the Environment at the University of North Carolina, and Kathleen and her team. And this is a photo of the group engaging in an on-site together activity that we did that focused on the climate resilience and building a cardboard city. So we were very proud of this moment. So it's fitting that it makes it on the first slide. So Kathleen. And like everyone else, I mean, we had a proposal and put together the plan for the project, which would have included a 6-day summer institute where we get the group together. We would have half-day academies and monthly webinars throughout the school year, and we would have a concluding summit with optional action projects by students. So they're taking the information they've learned about climate and resilience and turning it into action. That was the plan. And then if you advance, so we did recruitment and we got a wide variety of folks to join us in this, and a lot of interested students. And we had 2 cohorts. We focused on an urban group and a rural group. And so the counties highlighted here represent who we had participate in the project. And so the Museum of Natural Sciences is lucky enough to have a Raleigh facility, but we also have a branch of the museum in Whiteville, North Carolina. And those 2 cohorts were envisioned to be more separate, but we had to pivot and we ended up being one group, which was really nice that we had broad representation, kind of more spread out across the state. And so in thinking about how we were going to run the program, given the constraints, the reality of what happened is we started instead with some half-day academies. We did leadership sessions with students where we were together online. We had optional action projects. The students had a lot that they were dealing with, and we tried to foster them having a concluding community piece, but that wasn't possible in all scenarios. And then we ended up gathering the group at the end of the project for an in-person 3-day summer institute. And it was lovely to have the groups be able to get together finally in person at the end.
Thanks, Lynn. So I'm Kathleen Gray. I lead the Center for Public Engagement with Science at UNC Chapel Hill and one of the partners with the museum on this project. And we're going to talk now about how the pivot to virtual affected implementation of our program and evaluation of our program. And Lynn touched on it a little bit, but it is important to note, as she flagged looking at that map of North Carolina, that our goal at the outset had been to engage rural youth and urban youth in sort of parallel programming and bring them together at a few key points. And that was completely upended. So some challenges of pivoting the actual program online was connectivity for our rural cohort. So it's easy to feel like, well, we all have cell phones now and we all have access. But in fact, even at that museum location that Lynn pointed out in Whiteville, North Carolina, it was a spot for local students to come when they needed access for homework or schoolwork. And even their access was spotty. So even the community resources for internet connectivity are not always effective in some of our rural locations. So connecting our rural cohort to our online program was a challenge. Building community across both cohorts and within the cohorts was a challenge, just as we've all experienced, as Laurie was saying, that the online space isn't as conducive in some ways to networking and connecting with people. And then we hired 2 new younger educators. The museum hired 2 new younger educators into the project to lead each cohort. And it was really hard to integrate those new educators into our big existing infrastructure at UNC and at the museum. Since they joined virtually, we only met them in person at the end of the program. So that was challenging. But then benefits, even though I said connectivity was a problem, we actually, based on some of our experience, evaluation data and experience, found that the rural cohort was able to be more active than they might have been in our initial planning, because some of them were going to have to be driving an hour, 90 minutes to get to the museum. We ended up with more different leadership opportunities for all the youth in the program because they could really respond to their own interest and take initiative more than perhaps we had originally designed. We were able to bring in people from farther away, more diverse guests, And then also we used e-tools that we hadn't planned to use, and that let us get lots more participation, especially from people who maybe would have been not as comfortable speaking up in a group setting. So that's on the implementation side. And then on the evaluation side, we saw similar sort of challenges and benefits. We had lower completion rates when we did our evaluations of all the activities. In person, you can really stand by the door and make sure you get the paper or the feedback, but we were just sending out links after events and people didn't always complete them. We found it harder to incentivize participation electronically. And then those e-tools that really got greater engagement during events also made it harder to track people over time. But that is in part because we didn't design for an a virtual program. If we had known at the outset that's what we were going to be doing, we could have designed in order to capture that, but we were really doing this on the fly. We pivoted in a couple months, and it's a real credit to the team that they could do it. Benefits in terms of evaluation and pivoting to online was we actually got more data from more diverse sources, and we were able to streamline the analysis. So I want to kick back to Lynn just to talk about the benefits of this partnership and of the virtual programming that we did together, and then we'll be all done.
Yeah, so this partnership really allowed us to yield a stronger cohort, a more diverse group to participate in, using the tools of both institutions to promote the program. We really did get a strong cohort in a diverse group, which we were really proud of. And it definitely expanded the climate and health programming that the museum was able to do and open up a new target area for us. And especially in those more urban settings where we have a foothold, we have resources, and there are people being impacted, but be able to have specific programming touching on both of those.
UNC, getting those younger educators on board. The museum was much more nimble than we are in hiring, and they have a steady stream of young educators coming in. So having some experienced but younger educators, they really helped make that happen. And those educators combined with UNC students did some neat programming around storytelling that we hadn't even planned. It totally came from them, and it was very impactful for the participating youth. And then that Whiteville, North Carolina location anchored our rural programming, and we couldn't have done that without the museum. So we feel like this was a really outstanding project with good outcomes despite real challenges of pivoting to online. I just want to call out co-PI Dana Hain, who was a real visionary behind the project. You see her here working with some of the students. Thanks so much.
Wonderful, thank you. Thanks, Lynn and Kathleen. So now we'll hand it over to Erin and Carrie.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Jant, and I'm at Western, am I muted? No, okay. Western Kentucky University. And I'm working with Michelle Courtnar at the Science Center in Ithaca, New York, and Carrie Gibran, who's here with us today from Tompkins Community Action, and which is the community organization that oversees Head Start in Tompkins County in Ithaca. And so our project was a little less successful in the pivot to online than the last one that we heard about. And so that's what we're here to talk about today, just some of the challenges that we faced, and what we learned from that, and what we're thinking about. Well, now we're in person, so we're lucky in that sense, but what we're doing going forward. Okay, so originally our project was around our family engagement nights that we hold at the Science Center specifically for Head Start families, where once a month Head Start families can come to the Science Center after hours, and we have 4 specially constructed hands-on science activities set up in the museum that connect to their current classroom curriculum. And then of course the families can explore the Science Center, and all of the exhibits are open. And what's really critical about the Head Start nights in person at the Science Center is that the Head Start teachers are there helping to scaffold the activities and create a sense of community in that kind of STEM learning space for the families, so that they feel very comfortable with them. They know their teachers. And so that's been really, or that was a big proponent of this project. And then we also serve a hot meal to the families at the Science Center when they're there to visit. And so originally we were going to record family conversations around science while they were at the museum, and then some memory conversations when they're at home in the weeks that follow, and then also do a few transfer tasks with the children when they were at school. But then COVID happened, so we did not get to do all of those in-person things. So two things happened to us. One was the IRB where I was at the time, which was SUNY Binghamton, was not allowing any in-person research to be collected, any data to be collected in person last year. So we weren't able to get IRB approval to collect any data, but what we did instead was to continue to provide the programming for the families online. So we pivoted to sending home science kits to families once because the museum was closed for several months as well. So we sent the hands-on science kits to families. We invited them to join a Zoom meeting during scheduled family nights that they would typically go to the museum for, but instead join the Zoom. And what we included was a little bit more heavily scaffolded by museum educators during the Zoom nights, helping the families kind of think about and work through the science tasks. And so we only held 3 online events. And what we found was that we had pretty low attendance because once again, the Science Center, it's in Ithaca, but there's a lot of our Head Start families are in rural areas. So there was connectivity issues, access issues. So we had pretty low attendance for the online event compared to what we saw in person, which normally we would see anywhere from 35 to 50 families in person. But on Zoom, we were only getting about 3 to 5 families for each one of the virtual family nights. The families that did come to the Zoom came for most of them. They returned for either 1 or 2 of the Zoom meetings, and which was great. And it was also great that we could continue to connect with the families, right, and continue to connect with our partners in the project to make sure that we were really kind of building that sense of community. One of the other issues that we were faced with is that, families were just limited to the one activity that was sent home to them. And if children lost interest during the Zoom, it was hard to kind of re-engage them via Zoom versus in the museum where they had their 4 activity tables and the many different exhibits that they could choose to go to. If they didn't perhaps like one of the activity tables, they could find one that they liked. So overall, we found that when the programming was in place before this project started, family engagement was really much higher for the in-person events. We also found that while we were able to get approval to collect data online for those 3 events, that recruitment to participate seemed like it could be a little intrusive. We only had those 3 to 5 families, and we didn't want to scare them off and have them not return. So we decided that ultimately we wouldn't collect the data that we were planning to collect during that time. And we just worked on kind of relationship building and the partnerships. So moving family nights to virtual removed that free choice element. And part of our original project, we really wanted to look at how that, being at the museum and having that free choice exploration experience really was shaping children's science process skills and family engagement around that. And so we felt that our pivot to online wasn't a good substitution for that experience. And but we did see a benefit to virtual family nights because it was one way to continue to connect to our families and our community, to let them know that we knew they were still out there, that we still wanted them to engage in science, and that we were thinking about them during these tough times. Okay, let me stop the share. I just had a quick presentation. Did you have anything else to add, Carrie? Did I miss anything?
No, I think that pretty much covered it. For our Head Start program in general, we found a lot less participation in programming virtually. We, had to shut down classrooms and do a lot of our programming through Zoom, and it wasn't the same. It was hard to connect and make relationships with families.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, who's next? Charles and Kim, but she's not here. So Charles.
Okay, maybe. You guys see my screen? Okay, yes. My name is Charles Shea, and I am with the Institute of Future Intelligence. We are a small nonprofit organization focused on educational technology for both formal and informal science education. And this particular project was designed to crowdsource some more equivalent of Google Street View. Everybody knows Google Street View, but we're trying to figure out if we can shoot the entire cityscape in some more infrared. And this is, by the way, this is an image in downtown Boston. You can see we actually took the infrared images and stitch them together, just like the one you see from the Mars rover. You know, Mars rover would take all these images and then they send back to the Earth, and NASA scientists would stitch the images together. The original idea is to start teaching kids in the classroom a concept of heat transfer, conduction, convection, radiation, so they are prepared. And with the science, when they go to inspect their own house or the school's building, with the technology we provide, we use the infrared camera, which is the $200 one with educational discount. And then they use the science concept when they inspect their own building, school building, or even their own house. And we are hoping that then they would contribute to the images and data. So we, on the server side, then we will stitch them together to create this infrared street view. Which would otherwise be impossible to do because Google is not going to do that. If Google is not going to do that, no one can do that. And the crowdsourcing is the only way to go. And as you know, then COVID-19 arrived. So we disrupt a lot of people's, original plan. We no longer have access to the classroom. We usually go to the classroom because they need, once you have an educational technology program, it requires a lot of tech support. PD is not necessarily enough. We often offer 3 days of PD, but that's not enough. So we have to go to figure out, but we don't have access to a classroom. So we had to find out exactly how are we going to carry out this project. And so we spend some of our resources on developing a internet-based solution. And by thinking about, what more can we do beyond Zoom? And one of these projects is dealing with data, a lot of data. We collect, data through some more camera. It's a high throughput device that allow kids to collect 100 million data points every 10 seconds. So then we say, okay, this is obviously Internet of Things. How can we stream this data just like we stream Zoom? Then kids will have an additional channel of data in addition to listening to the instructions through Zoom. And what can we do with those data so that we can make the experience more interesting and more inquiry driven? And so we kind of developed this platform we call TerraLab. It can be used at both in any way. Basically, all you have is you have an app and you basically have an infrared camera. You plug the infrared camera into a phone, then you download our app. Our app knows how to talk to the cloud. We have a server in the cloud. So everywhere they go in the classroom or outside, they can always stream data to our server. And people who are invited to that room, it's like Zoom. In a way, it works like a Zoom, except that you are not only getting the images, but also getting the data. So this way we kind of can, as you guys can imagine, it's not exact, but I would say it's a good approximation of what is happening in person setting. And so we also allow them to do some remote control so they can control. We mount some more cameras on a robot, then they can mount, they can control some more camera so kids can view a building from different angles or view an experiment from a different perspective. So with this day, we spend some time thinking about exactly how do these, what kind of learning model can we support. We call this remote inquiry. Is basically a way to not only we have a data going between students and teachers, and then we support these 3 circles. We call it, student and lab interaction. Students can get their data from the lab instantaneously. They can also do remote control, so the traffic goes either way. And they can observe, by the way, when you get the data, there's an interface within a browser. I can't show you in real time, but I have a poster session. You guys can come to my poster session. I can show you in real time action. So they can use whatever tools within a browser to analyze the incoming data in real time, by the way, in real time. This means, obviously they can always deal with the data has been saved in a database, but it's not as good as real time. We found real time is more engaging because you can always talk to the other students, through video or audio, and not necessarily Zoom. And there's always interaction between students and instructor. The instructors can, and since this is a model is actually designed for, I will show you in the next slide, for just one class or one instructor with a bunch of participants. So the student can always ask teachers to do something or the other end. So for example, if you see I'm doing a chemical reaction, you can always ask this question. Students can always ask this question: can you increase the concentration so I can see if the reaction go faster or slow? So as I say, we eventually ask this question. We spend all this NSF money. Thanks, Zoe, for your support. What if COVID-19 passed? So everybody is facing this question. If COVID-19 is behind us, I hope so. Okay, so is this thing still useful? And we think so, because it's a lot of things that we've been doing actually is going to may become a good part of online education. And we can imagine that this is going to be a way that allow citizen science, a good platform for citizen science, because one of the problems for citizen science is that you can be anywhere, right? You don't necessarily have to come to, let's say, the Triangle. If you are living in the southern part of North Carolina, right? You can always join from a distance, and you can get the data in real time, and you can also give input to whoever is organizing this event. Like, for example, I saw the first project is building this city. Why if you take out some more camera, you go to North Carolina, you go to Durham or Raleigh to study the summer island effect, right? In the summer, it's brutally hot in North Carolina, and you might want to use the technology to engage students in that way. Well, that's it. I obviously we are still. Actually, we have a bunch of events in the past, mostly serving students and teachers all over the country. And Kim, my partner, is out sick today. Unfortunately, I forgot to introduce her, even in her absence. And the reason that we are working with her is because she has been working with International Space Station on this program called Space Academy. And there were lots of schools, after-school clubs on the ground. On the ground, interacting with the International Space Station. And we thought this would be a good opportunity for us to kind of integrate whatever she already has. She has this network of informal science club. And our idea is to integrate our programs with hers. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Charles. All right, and last but not least, we have Karen and Aaron.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Okay, so basically our team, Aaron Masari from University of Minnesota. We have Arturo Fuentes, Brian Warren, and Jessica Lavariega. She was our external evaluator. And thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to present in this conference meeting, in this annual conference. So we had, basically what's the impact, for the design and measure of our project. So the initial goal for our project was the migration of the Energy and Use show, which is basically an on-stage science extravaganza that the University of Minnesota had created and worked on it for the last 10 years. Aaron Masari, who is my partner here, he is the director of this show. So when we saw the show, we are like, it needs to come to South Texas. It just needs to come to South Texas. We need to also do it in Spanish. You know, we have those specific objectives, develop the step-by-step manual to guide site migration, basically serve as a model so then it can be disseminated wider, you know, have like a franchise manual where then everybody that wants to do it can do it. It's an amazing show, highly recommended if you have a chance to go to one of the live ones, but it's an amazing show, or watch what we did. So we also proposed that we were going to develop educational brochures for parents, teachers, and school administrators, and of course, mentor and involve junior faculty in outreach activities. So here we are, you know, South Texas, warm, great weather, not so great in the summer with 104, but we don't have snow at all, you know, I think 100 years and something, nothing. So we traveled to Minnesota in January when they actually host the show, the second week of January. We were there the first week of January for the rehearsals, and then we were there for the show. You can see in the picture who is from Minnesota and who is from South Texas. And then we were ready, you know, to migrate it. We saw it, we have all the documentation, and then COVID hit right after, right? So we had to pivot. We had to find out, you know, what to do. And so our goal, you know, the migration of the South Texas community and beyond, it actually became and beyond. We had to say, okay, if we're going to pivot, we have to pivot and do it bigger and wider and take advantage of the technology, take advantage of the opportunity, and just move on, you know, because it's a wonderful show. We had to take advantage of, you know, all the, you know, the platform that we were sitting at from the work that Minnesota had done. So we established and presented, we were supposed to establish and present the show to 8,000 guests. Yes, we actually presented to 15,600. We went through all of the work of the website, scheduling, managing social media, you know, train junior faculty, how to, you know, do it a virtual show, you know, change what needed to be changed in the script, alter some of the demos that might not have such an impact on screen, and, you know, they're more appropriate for live, some that are more appropriate for video. Take advantage of, for example, the rockets, you know, do further and beyond. We developed the Spanish version of the show. We developed a step-by-step manual to guide site migration. We now have the franchise manual that can guide, you know, wider dissemination and implementation at other national or international venues. And we mentor and involve junior faculty in outreach activities. We have one objective pending, and in that one, we were asked by the teachers to develop that objective. So it's very good because now we propose something, and something that we propose a priori, we found out that is something that they need, and they're asking us to do that one. And still the grant is alive, so we have not finished, and we're planning on doing that. I'm going to show a very quick video as to, you know, the reaction of the kids to our show. Let's see, let me see if I can just do that a little faster by doing it here.
Of new things, like the unit of energy is joules, and the source of energy around the world is the sun. My favorite demo is when they launched the rockets. They saw how far it went, how long, and they also saw how much joules it took.
It was mind-blowing.
My favorite experiment was the gummy bear one.
How much joules were in that one gummy bear?
29 gummy bears is equal to 1 million joules. So it's equal to 1 sticker, and then 1 sticker is 1 million, and our body needs 7 million.
You actually, every day you use 7 million joules.
Can you create energy? Can you destroy energy?
No. 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 No.
What is it that you can do with energy?
I learned that you can't create energy or destroy it. And I also learned some of the forms of energy, like potential, chemical, light, heat, and mechanical. What I learned about today's lesson is that you cannot create energy or you cannot destroy energy, but you can transform energy. I learned that you cannot create energy, you cannot destroy energy, but you can transform energy into different things. And now I know what's going on behind my outfit.
Energy cannot be created and energy cannot be destroyed. Energy can transform.
No la puedes crear ni destruir, solo la puedes transformar. What I learned was the law of thermodynamics that says that energy can't be created or destroyed, only transferred.
No se puede ni destruir la energía ni hacer energía.
¿Te gustaría ser ingeniero o científico cuando seas grande?
Sí, porque me interesa saber sobre la energía. I enjoyed the video so much that I got astonished.
Let me just. Okay, so coming back, this is the reaction that we had. This is the reaction that our kids had to the video. These are questions that it was very hard. I guess lessons learned. It was very hard to talk to the parents. It was very hard to get to the teachers, talk to the parents. So we basically sent out notices, and whoever volunteered, we sent some questions to ask the kids right after the show. And these are some of the reactions that parents sent us videos. It was we have a lot more than those, but it was very nice to see that there was a very positive response, that the kids learned very easy the message that we wanted to give away. As for the evaluation, some of the objectives that we had, we were supposed to use clickers and ask some of these questions in the live show. We found that doing it through this venue, we were able to reach to a lot more responders. We had like 3,500 responses for the surveys. It was very, I don't think we were going to be able to get to that many responses using clickers. One thing that we still have to find out how to do it, the parents' perceptions of STEM careers. In the live shows we have on Saturdays, we have planned that for Saturdays, we're going to have the families come together. We had a lot of attendees, students during the week. And when we did the virtual Saturday family shows, the attendance was very little compared to the week shows. So that we still have to work a little bit on that. The lessons learned, Zoom polls, they're not the best option. So it didn't work. I don't know if there was too much data. We talked to technical support from Zoom. We tried anything to try to recover the data from the February shows where we had about 9,700 attendees. We only were able to, recover less than 500. So we lost a lot of the data from the February shows. We moved to Google Forms for the May presentations. We got 3,100 responses to, in the we have a survey before we begin the show, and then we have a survey at the end of the show. So we had a lot more responses, or we were able to collect a lot more data. For those students in class, there were some schools, particularly Minnesota, they were already in class, and it was hard to receive a response because the teachers were showcasing in the screen in the front. So students didn't have an opportunity to interact with the computer and do the responses for the survey. Teachers, we noticed the teachers were overworked, so it was very hard to pass forms and print and do a lot of things that they usually do. They were doing already a fantastic job. So ultimately, the intervention, we think, was very successful, even during the pandemic and even in this virtual environment. Some of the results that we obtained, 49% of the participants declare as female, 45% male. the language at home was 48% English, 37% bilingual, 15% only Spanish. Questions asked about parents graduating from college, 32% say yes to both parents having a college degree, 42% said at least one parent has a college degree. The show serves to encourage STEM careers. We saw a very positive response to the kids with the questions asked, you know, are you planning on pursuing a STEM career? And then after the show, and it was very positive. The show definitely taught the first law of thermodynamics. When we asked the question, can you create energy at the beginning of the show, 74% said yes. And then, of course, at the end of the show, 76% said no. And then when we asked the question, can you destroy energy? At the beginning of the show, 44% say yes. And at the end of the show, 87% said no. These are kind of the questions that, you know, how it was popping up in Zoom, and we were very excited. We can see how, you know, the pre, this is the pre one, can you create energy? And they're saying yes. And then at the end, they're saying no. And we're like, okay, they learn, you know, the message, they learn the lesson. But then we couldn't recover any of that data, or very few of that data from Zoom. So the feedback that we received, we need for external science curricular material to complement the videos, opportunity for Energy and You to have a continuous presence in the classroom. And that was one of the objectives that we had posted a priori, and that was the feedback from teachers. A lot of the teachers, we got lots of email asking when's part 2 coming, you know, can we sign can we sign our classroom for next event? And so it was very positive. We got a lot of responses from the teachers when we posted first in February. We had we were kind of begging and social media and sending everywhere around for people to sign up. When we had when we opened up the May week, it was like in 3 days we filled 8,000 spots. So it was very fast. I think people already knew what we were doing, and the school districts were just, you know, they were signing everybody immediately. So we were very happy with how it went, despite the circumstances. So definitely a great effort among UTRGV, University of Minnesota, and definitely grateful to National Science Foundation. We were also able to include a lot of the students because our students were the ones that co-hosted the show in the Zoom meetings. So it was a very nice experience. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I love the video. Okay, so based on the fact that we only have about 15 minutes left, I think we're not going to break out into breakout rooms and keep the discussion here. We also have a fairly small group of people. We don't have 100, we have 37 as far as I can see. So, so I just want to mention that the reason why I chose this particular panel to facilitate is because I recently completed a report on behalf of an NSF Rapid grantee all about this experiment that we're in. And specifically, it addressed how researchers have had to adapt their qualitative methods to study learning at home and in communities. So the report actually features, I'll stick it in the chat, the report actually features case studies of 3 NSF Rapid projects. And in my analysis of these cases, there are a few issues that I didn't really hear addressed today. And so I thought that I would maybe pose them to this group of panelists, but also to the larger group of participants here, because I know that, again, everybody has been affected by the pandemic in some way. So I kind of want to open it up to everyone to address. So, so first of all, I'm just going to stick this. Okay. So this is the report that I wrote, so you don't have to read it now. But anyway, so I'm going to share my screen with these discussion questions that I would love to invite people to address. Okay, so again, getting back to like what I am interested in hearing about, although there are 2 kind of specific questions and 2 that are more general. what implications has the pandemic had on your projects in terms of equity, inclusion, and access? And feel free to talk about like for better or for worse, right? So what doors might your solutions or workarounds have opened? And then has the pandemic presented what you consider maybe some unresolvable, or as far as we can see, roadblocks for certain populations of learners? And then how have your relationships with community members and or research participants had to change, right? So, and like a sub question specifically, like, are there any ethical considerations that these shifts have raised? And then, and again, those are sort of the issues that I saw in this report that I was compiling. And then just more generally, I know that some people have shared their lessons, but what is the most important lesson you've learned through all of this? How will this lesson affect the way you plan for future projects? And since some of the panelists have already shared, I'd actually be interested in hearing maybe from some of the participants, the audience members. And then lastly, this is a big question. We probably won't be able to answer this today, but it's a question that I like to think about is how does the informal science learning community need, what does the informal science learning community need to do moving forward? What weaknesses in our infrastructures and systems has the pandemic revealed that are maybe fixable? And then what do we need to improve at the field level so that we are more prepared next time something like this happens? And it could be another pandemic and it could be something else. So I would love to open it up. Wondering, I'd like to see people speak. And so I don't know, do people want to see the questions? And again, you can pick and choose. We're not going to be able to cover all of them. Or do people want to see each other? I can stick this file into the chat as well. Or actually, I can stick the questions in the chat. So I'm going to stick the questions in the chat. So anyone?
Lori, I can, I guess for inclusion and equity and your first question, I think everybody was forced to move at an accelerated pace, right? And take advantage of, innovate and, pivot and adapt, to a new situation. But that, in a way, at least for us, it probably opened up opportunities for a lot more people. So I think, it was more inclusive, and it was, we believe it opened up opportunities, especially that the cities, they went and did Wi-Fi in different regions, so the kids had different, access to participate in all of this, because without that, there was going to be definitely not an opportunity to be inclusive. But
Yep. Great, thank you. And it looks like Carlos.
Yeah, that's me. Thank you.
Yes.
So I'm Carlos Sevilla from the National Magnet Lab in Tallahassee, Florida, an NSF lab, yay. I wanted to point out one of the advantages and disadvantages of the whole COVID times and having a virtual program, and that is the advantage of being able to reach an underserved community and not have to worry about transportation to and from locations. And I see lots of nodding. However, that same community also has a struggle of needing babysitters, for lack of a better term, for their children during the workday. So you can eliminate the transportation aspect by having them log in from home. However, the parents lose that whole, like I said, the child support or watching aspect of it as well. So you've got both things going on there. We were fortunate in that the transportation superseded any of the other problems, and we were able to get very good participation in our program. So.
Thank you. Anyone else on anything?
I found that our programs were really able to invite a lot of different speakers and presenters that we wouldn't normally have been able to engage because of the distance. Much like the students joining in, we were able to get some really wonderful resources for the students and for them. When you ask a professional to join a Zoom meeting with, high school students, is a little bit easier ask, I think, sometimes than being in person. And they were just able to share and converse. And it was one of those benefits that we found. And Kathleen may have something. I think she had her hand. Yeah.
Yes, Kathleen.
Hey, yeah, I actually was going to say something not directly building off of what Lynn was saying, but an ethical issue. So you asked a question about ethics. So we did find that it was harder to recruit youth into our study. And I've done human subjects research for decades with youth and adults. And so I do feel that some of that was because we did all of the describing the study and the consent process virtually, which was new for us. So some folks who've been doing that work virtually forever could, help us do it better. But again, part of what was this pivot in real time was we just had to do as best we could. And there's no question we didn't build rapport in the same way as I have experienced doing it in person. And I don't think we reached all of our populations. And there were definitely challenges because we were working with diverse youth. For some youth, the challenge of the pandemic and the societal awakening in some ways following George Floyd's murder, like these two events for some of our youth participants were just overwhelming. And then we are layering on this program that we're trying to create with them and for them. So
Great, thank you, Kathleen. Deborah.
I thank you to everyone for sharing all of your experiences with this. And, I think there may have been some conversation about this a little. I'm just wondering in terms of at this point in time where everyone is, we've learned we're good at it, but I think everyone's also really tired of the pandemic. And I wonder if anyone has thoughts about sustainability with a lot of this, and if you're going to try to go forward with some of these lessons learned, or if you think everyone's just going to kind of fall off a cliff, because that could also happen.
Such a good question. Marjorie, hi Marjorie.
Hey, Lori. Yeah, I'm so struck by what everybody's saying, and we grappled with a lot of this as well. The human subject stuff, being in people's homes instead of interviewing them in a neutral space, especially with young people, it forced us to learn a whole bunch of new things. I think ultimately what I always want to come back to here, and I think is inherent in what you're asking, Lori, is could we just take an existing program and transfer it into a digital world and have the same outcomes? Assume that the program is operating in the same way, and we're just transitioning our methods to study sort of the same research questions for a research study or the same outcomes for an evaluation project? Or do we assume that these spaces are similar and have similar outcomes or similar sets of goals or questions, but they are inherently different in some ways? And I think this pushes at the last question there. Can we choose for the strengths of each of them and acknowledge that they're not actually equivalent? They're not just taking the same program and transferring it over. It is a little bit different, and we should choose accordingly.
Thank you, Marjorie. Very well put. Thank you. Thank you for articulating that. We have 3 more minutes left, and we have a lot of stuff coming into the chat. Oh, and Laura, Laura? Yes,
hi.
Please.
Such great conversations over the course of yesterday and today. In response to Deborah, your comment about are people just going to sort of fall off an abyss, the project that my group is working on is actually on climate change. So we were kind of excited about this opportunity to start doing an online version in terms of thinking about how do we start having people operate more successfully in a carbon constrained world where travel isn't such a possibility. What does that world look like, and how could it effectively be done? We actually had to transition our community workshops, of which there were supposed to be 8 around the country. We've so far, half of them are going to be online, and we're still hoping that maybe half of them will be in person because we'd love to compare them. But we also got a small supplemental grant from NSF in order to look at conferences that had historically been held as in-person events, to compare to what were the online versions of those like in terms of participant experience, especially in terms of networking like this opportunity is trying to afford us, and how you could, what were good practices for actually encouraging and maintaining networking. So I think that as hard as this has been this year to figure out, and I think there are great opportunities that have come with it. We've certainly seen a broader diversity of participants, not only in the program we're doing with our NSF funding, but in other work that we're doing, which has been very exciting. But how do we make this sort of not such an isolated experience, but a community experience, so that going forward, we can reap the benefits of doing this kind of online work to not have such a large carbon footprint in everything that we're doing.
Great, thank you so much for making that point. And with that, we have 1 minute left. So I think it is, I don't see any other hands, but lots of good chat. I think it's time to just thank our panelists and thank you all for joining today. This is a really interesting conversation, and I'm sure hopefully we won't be having the same conversation in exactly the same way next year. But I'm sure it's a topic that we're going to continue to think about over the next several months.